Well, hey guys, this is Mr. Gallion. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the next thing that we were going to discuss. We would have looked at this if we were in school, but it would have been a little bit different, um, which is PowerPoint presentations. We're actually not going to, well, we are going to do PowerPoint. We're going to do it a little bit differently than maybe you've done often in the past. But before we dive into exactly what we're going to do, I want to talk to you about what makes a PowerPoint effective versus ineffective. There's a lot of PowerPoints out there that are really, really bad. And I want to make sure that you are not guilty of making those. So we're going to take just a minute and we're going to walk through some of these things that you should do and some things you shouldn't do. Now, I will say this, you may have been in another class in middle school, maybe even in our school, that gave you a different list of rules, and that's okay because different people have different preferences. Ultimately, you're going to make your own list of things that are and aren't acceptable to you, but you got to think about them. You got to think about what they are, and so we're gonna look at that for just a little bit right now. I do ask that while you're with me, you consider my rules, and then you can go out and make your own elsewhere, but hopefully I've challenged you to think about it. So we're going to look at what it takes, excuse me, to make an effective PowerPoint presentation. So one of the first things you've got to think about, oh, there we go, is that you got to make it big enough to read, okay? These top three especially are way too small, especially from a distance. Now you're sitting at your computer right now, so this is, you might look at all those and say, I can read 12. I mean, Word is 12. That's true. But if you're somewhere else, those are way, way, way too small. Think about being in class, think about being in a big auditorium or something. You're definitely not going to be able to read those smaller ones, okay? And you might say the color is bad too. Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that in a minute too. I would say the bigger that you can make it, the better. You say that limits how much I can put on one screen. Yeah, that's absolutely true. We'll talk about that too, okay? So one really good way to estimate is to look at it from about 7 feet away. Scoot back from your computer 7 feet, take a look at it. If you can't read it, it's probably too small to read on a screen. You want to keep your PowerPoint presentations very simple, okay? This is, maybe you like it, maybe it looks pretty, but it's got too many colors. It's very distracting. This has too many fonts and styles. I would say just stick to one font all the way through. I like Calibri, I don't care what you call it. People always have issues. Some people like Arial. Some people like Times New Roman. I suggest you not do that one for PowerPoint. We'll talk about why in a minute. But for what we do, stick to one font unless you have a really, really good reason. A good thing to stick to is something called the 6x7 rule that keeps you from overwhelming your audience with too much information. Okay, that means you don't want more than 6 lines in a slide. You don't want more than 7 words in a line. Now, this is a general rule. It's not always the case. Sometimes you might have a good reason to have more, but not as a rule. That would be an exception to the rule. So 6 lines per slide, 7 words per line. Again, generally. Now you look at this, and what does your mind do? What do your eyes do? Like, is this meaning anything to you? This is super complex. There are a lot of words in there. Technically, it doesn't even violate the 6x7 rule. But that's a lot of information. I would suggest that you summarize things that you put in PowerPoint and use as few words as possible because this is a much better definition. It's not better in the sense that the words mean more accurate things, but it's much more usable in a PowerPoint setting. Fewer words is better than too many. A common rule that people make is they think that PowerPoint is for the presenter to keep them on track. And sometimes you can use it that way for sure. I mean, I use it that way. But it's not primarily for me. It's primarily for you and the audience. So yeah, maybe this is everything I want to say, but that's not going to work as an aid to the audience, okay? All right, it's much simpler. Extra slides are free, so if you find yourself using too much information, go ahead and use an extra slide. Hit Control M as your hotkey, or you can, right-click and insert something. That's fine. You also can give too much visual information in other ways. So here you look at that, and we're looking at, I guess this is New Zealand leaves that are falling. That's too much information. This is way simpler. You say this is in millions. That might actually be usable. Again, I don't like those colors. We'll talk about that in a bit. Keep it simple regarding sound. Now, I don't think this is set up so you'll hear my speakers. Yeah, it didn't work for you. So this was supposed to be a laser thing, and since you're at home and you're bored, I'll entertain you. It was going to do something like this, which you don't really want it to do. Okay, that's distracting. I would only suggest that you use sound effects when necessary. It usually isn't. Um, there's, I think, one, maybe two presentations I use in my US history class in a year that includes sound, and it's mostly for scaring people who might be asleep. It's fun. Oops, let's try that again. Think about your transitions. Some of these transitions, you have to wait for them to finish. That's annoying. It's distracting. The speaker's probably going to wait until it moves on. The audience is wondering what it's all about. You probably just want to use appear and disappear. Maybe fade is actually what that one is. But that's much better. It doesn't distract the audience, okay? This too, that's not great. You might say, hey, you used this image before. Yeah, and that's not the way that the image is entered, okay? Super distracting, not what you want your audience to be thinking about. You just want them to think about, oh, why is that girl there? Why is she scooting back 7 feet? Okay, that's a much better, see how that just kind of appeared? It went from boom, boom. Okay, that helps you understand exactly what you want people to be doing. It's simple and it's to the point. Make it clear. Think about how you're actually typing out the content you've got. Do not use all capital letters. All capital letters sound like in an email as if you're yelling. Up here, it's actually kind of hard to read. Your eye doesn't distinguish. Your eye works much better when you've got, if you see here, some things, some letters that go above the average line, some things that go below the average line, and none that don't. It's easier to differentiate. You might say, and people do every year, I can read it just fine. It's not a problem. Yeah, sure, maybe you can. That's fine. But most people need uppercase and lowercase, only use caps for emphasis. And I would argue that's not even the best way to have emphasis. You can see here what I've typed. The word only does jump out at you in that sentence because it's the only thing that's capitalized. You say, well, you mentioned before that you don't like Times New Roman. Why is that? Well, there are two different types of font. There is sans serif and there is serif, okay? These aren't names of specific fonts, although you might see some that are called this. These are types of fonts. A sans serif doesn't have feet, okay? By feet, I mean these things over here that are like flourishes, okay? Sans serif, sans is French for without. It doesn't have the serif. It doesn't have this extra foot. It's just plain, it's clear, and from a distance, it's much better. Sometimes, especially for older people, even older than me, these extra feet can be a little bit distracting and hard to distinguish some things from a distance. So don't use those. Here's a comparison. So serif fonts are a little bit difficult to read on a screen. The sans serif are much clearer. Same thing with italics. Better to stick with normal or bold if you want to specifically identify anything. If you have an underline on a PowerPoint, especially something at home, you might say, oh, that's a link I can click on. The best way to emphasize is to use color. Everybody looks at color and says, oh yeah, that jumps out. I see it, no problem. I'm actually going to skip over this. The sequencing, cool, that's great. But we need to talk about this. This is something that bugs me. When you're making a PowerPoint, make sure your colors are contrasting. You don't want to have a white background almost ever. And yes, I know that some of your teachers do it and it drives me up the wall. You're welcome to tell them, because I didn't name anybody. So you can say, Mr. Gallion doesn't like that, and that's fine. You say, why is that? Well, let me show you. Okay, right here, this is super easy to read. Okay, this use contrasting colors. Those colors contrast very well. These down at the bottom that have low contrast don't. You say, that's not the white background thing. All right, so let's talk about it. Here's a light on dark. Man, easy to read. That yellow pops. This looks like garbage. Okay, don't do that. Don't do it to me. Don't do it to your audience. Even if it doesn't bother you, I guarantee you it bugs somebody out there in your audience. Okay. Think about the size of what you're including out there. If something is really big, that implies that you want people to look there. In this case, the picture seems more important than the text. On the other hand, you might have something like this where the text is more important than the picture. This is just to think about it. But I see people do this all the time. Also, look at all that blank space there. That's a lot of wasted space. Why would you do that in a PowerPoint when you've got all this space that can be filled with visually interesting things? Right? Blank space is boring. Don't do that. So use your space wisely, create visual interest. I'd even encourage you to not use the exact same format for the slide every time. Like here I've got text on the left, picture on the right. Maybe switch it up. Maybe sometimes make the picture take up the whole screen. Maybe sometimes make it take up, part of the screen. It's, yeah, lots of different options here, but make sure it's interesting. Be consistent. If you have differences, they draw attention. You might say, hey, this is important, like when you use yellow to indicate, look here. Surprises should attract, not distract. So right here, look at that tick. Your attention goes right to it. In this case, everything's different. I don't know which one's important, okay? So don't do that. In this case, it's the different color and the different bullet point that makes me look at that one. The other ones I kind of ignore. Right here, I don't know. What do you want me to look at? All those words? Maybe. There are probably better ways to do that. So be big, be simple, be clear, and be consistent. I'm going to ignore that for now. Yeah. What I'm going to have you do today is that I'm going to drop a really bad image of a PowerPoint. Actually, it'll be a second video, I think, of a PowerPoint into Google Classroom. I want you to watch it. I want you to take a look at it. And I want you to just make a list of the things that you see, the rules that I've given you that you see that PowerPoint violates, okay? I'm going to tell you exactly how many. I think it's 5, but I need to look at my assignment again. There are way more than that are wrong with this thing, but if you can find at least 5 problems with it and you're right, then I will be extremely happy with that, and you should be in good shape. Just a little word on the back end here of what we're doing. Hey, there we go. Just a little word on the back end. I'm not going to kill you with work in this class. This is an elective, okay? And so if you say, hey, we don't have quite as much going on as we did previous, yeah, that's true, because you've got math, you've got science, you've got social studies, which is the best, and you've got, what math, science? English, that's the other one. And so I don't want to kill you with this, but I do want to keep moving forward so you can get credit in this class and hopefully learn something along the way, okay? So reach out to me if you need some help. Make sure you look at the other video that's got the bad PowerPoint in it, and I will talk with you soon. Hope you guys are staying home and healthy. See you next time.